names and numbers of Catholic priests that abuse children. You know, that's the kryptonite of the Catholic Church.
They learned from the files about the extent of cover-up, the extent of sexual abuse that had happened.
If your abuser's name was on that list, imagine the relief that you might feel that maybe I'm not at fault. Maybe it wasn't me.
Dear Monsignor Leo, we, the undersigned, as representatives of various regions across Canada,
respectfully request to address the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops
as they gather for the Plenary Assembly in Cornwall, Ontario in September 2019.
On a matter of personal and universal importance.
Clergy sexual abuse.
Clergy sexual abuse.
Clergy sexual abuse.
Enduring abuse at the hands of a clergy member has caused us unnecessary harm
throughout the course of our lives.
But it has also provided us with critical insight that could be of great benefit to the Church.
We thank you for your consideration on this urgent matter.
As we await your favorable response.
Respectfully, Gemma Hickey.
Jerry Boyle.
Nancy Mayer.
Evelyn Corkmass.
Leona Huggins.
Brenda Brunel.
They have come from every region of the country, each one a survivor. As children, they were all sexually abused by priests, betrayed by the Catholic Church.
Hello, how are you? Good to see you.
The men, the power behind that church in Canada, no longer deny abuse happened. But what they have never acknowledged is the extent. How many among them, past and present, have preyed on those in their care? How far has the church gone in protecting them? For decades, the answers have been hidden away in church archives, including lists of clergy the church accepts were credibly accused. Survivors want the lists made public.
I think that the church has an ethical and moral responsibility to reveal those names, to shed light on the legacy, because some of these men are still esteemed within the communities that they work, as Father McCann was. This is McCann on a trip. I don't know where we were.
Father John McCann was Leona Huggins' parish priest growing up in Vancouver.
He had a guitar, he played the guitar, and I just remember, wow, that's really cool, right? Like, you can be a priest and you can still be funny. Absolutely believe that.
What did he do to you?
Just little things, like he'd sit on the couch and he'd put his hand on my leg, and then he'd put his arm around me. And then he got me, my sister and I, to work at the rectory. And he would come in at the end of the work, and he would just start massaging me on my shoulders. And everything just was gradually more and more.
How old were you at this time?
I would say 14.
In Australia, a high-level royal commission has revealed the scale of child sex abuse by Catholic priests.
Pope Benedict took an unprecedented step today to address the child abuse scandal that has engulfed the Irish Catholic Church.
This is the Catholic archbishop now reeling from the biggest church child abuse scandal anywhere in Europe.
All over the world, even in the most Catholic of countries, deference to the church is evaporating.
Ireland, Australia, across Europe, Latin America, the Pacific, all have faced abuse scandals in the Catholic Church or its institutions.
Big names have been prosecuted for their own sins and for the role some have played in covering up abuse. And then there are those files.
The stunning report today involving the Catholic Church in Pennsylvania, a scathing grand jury report accusing more than 300 Catholic priests of child sex abuse.
For the first time, we can begin to understand the systematic cover-up by church leaders that followed.
In 2018, the state of Pennsylvania forced dioceses to turn over their archives and discovered how much church officials knew about those 300 priests and their more than 1,000 victims.
And what they did, they got warrants from judges to march into the chancery offices of the various dioceses and take their files. There was no discussion, there was no debate. We're taking them, get out of the way.
Doyle himself is a Catholic priest, but today he helps lead the campaign to hold his church accountable.
And what did they learn from those files?
They learned from the files the protection. They found out that the methodology of dealing with it, shuffling these men from one place to another, was systemic throughout the entire state.
In the year and a half since Pennsylvania, at least 17 other U.S. states have launched similar investigations. Some Catholic dioceses have published their own lists of known perpetrators voluntarily. The number of U.S. priests now deemed credibly accused by their own church is more than 6,800.
Why isn't that happening in Canada?
I was mystified for years. I knew this was going on in Canada. It had to be. But why, there's very little media attention, very little organization of the victims. Throughout history, every time there'd be some sort of an explosion of sexual abuse, they're the ones that took charge. They determined what was going to happen to the perpetrators. Those days are gone. Now the victims are in charge. We are the ones that are steering the bus.
Enter Leona Huggins. In the aftermath of Pennsylvania's bombshell report, the Archbishop of her diocese became the first church leader in Canada to promise action. In a letter to parishioners, Vancouver Archbishop Michael Miller agreed bold steps were needed to hold abusive clergy accountable for their terrible crimes, as well as correcting what he called systemic flaws that contributed to abuse or cover-up. Promising transparency, he ordered his diocese files opened and reviewed.
He had said in the letter that if there were survivors out there to call, that they had a number to set up.
So what did the Archbishop tell you he would do at that point?
He told me he was forming a committee and he wanted me to be on that committee. And the committee would review the files to look for missteps.
And why you? Why was that important?
Because he said, you've got a lot you could teach us. Absolutely.
Indeed, she could. One of the files in the diocese archive was of Father John McCann. For 20 years, Leona told no one of the sex McCann forced on her. But in the early 90s, she went to police. He pleaded guilty to crimes involving Leona and another teenage girl and was sentenced to 10 months in jail.
So you assumed that this was the end of his career as a priest, that he wouldn't be working with children again?
Ever again.
And that you had done the right thing and stopped the predator before he had a chance to do any more damage?
Absolutely. So I trusted that this organization that holds themselves up is going to do the right thing and ensure that he's never in a position where he can have access to children, because that's what people should do.
But that's not what happened.
Around Easter 2011, I was Googling, and a YouTube video of him saying a pro-life mass in Ottawa showed up. And I was beside myself. I was just horrified. I was pacing up and down in my kitchen and just going, this is not okay. A priest cannot work in another jurisdiction without permission from a bishop. So somebody gave him permission to work in Ottawa.
Sitting on the committee to compile Vancouver's list was not an easy decision for Leona. She didn't actually get to see any files, not even McCann's. Church lawyers provided verbal summaries. Nevertheless, this July, the committee delivered its report, including names of the credibly accused, along with the recommendation that the Archbishop share the names publicly.
Eventually, I ended up going in to meet him and said the same thing. We need the names. We need you to release survivors from any confidentiality agreements and post the names.
What did he tell you that he was going to do?
I believe he told me at the end of this, a list would be published.
You recall him telling you that?
Yes. He said, "You're right. That needs to happen."
This is the plutonium of scandal for the Catholic Church. The names and numbers of Catholic priests that abuse children. That's the kryptonite of the Catholic Church. And to ask them just to hang it out on the internet isn't going to happen.
Rob Talek of London, Ontario, has taken the Catholic Church to court more than 400 times. His nickname, the Priest Hunter.
I would like to see the list of the predators, the files on them. I'd like to see how many times they were transferred from one area to another.
1 month before the bishops' conference in Cornwall, Talek hosts a planning meeting with those hoping to confront the bishops. Leona is on the line from Vancouver.
My research tells me we have 87 active bishops and 6,000 active priests in ministry in Canada. So, if we were to use the conservative number that's used by other bishops, that tells me we've got 370, 400 active pedophiles in active ministry across this country. That's a problem.
Brenda Brunel is a driving force behind the group. As a teenager, she says she was groomed and abused by her parish priest, too.
Father Filona would eat my hair and tell me how wonderful the color of my red hair was. He often referred to my green cat eyes, that I had the most beautiful cat eyes. He would hang on to me and hug me and tell me how much I loved this, how much he loved me.
When she sued decades later, the priest claimed he didn't know who she was. But the church settled with her anyway, after she agreed to keep details of the settlement secret.
I think our public needs to know, in my case, because the priest was never criminally charged, he's in a retirement home now, and yet he was found credibly accused.
Which is why the list is so important, she says, to protect future victims, but also to give solace to those abused in the past.
There are still so many people that blame themselves. If you had access to such a list and you just looked, and if your abuser's name was on that list, imagine the relief that you might feel that maybe I'm not at fault. Maybe it wasn't me. Maybe it wasn't that body on tap shampoo that I had in my hair. Maybe it wasn't the green eyes that Filona thought was so great.
You think the church at least owes you and other victims that?
They owe us that. They owe this community that.
Make it accountable, turn over the records, and with any credibility, turn them over to the authorities for a process.
They all have the list. They all know who's in their diocese.
Tell me your thoughts about this group and what it is that they're trying to do.
Well, they're all very inspirational people that have been through some hard times very early in their life. And I think, it's a testament to their courage and resiliency. They're getting together to do this.
There are lists of priests in diocese of names of predators that no one is aware of.
But let's not fool ourselves. They are up against the oldest and most wealthy corporation on this planet. I mean, the Catholic Church is a formidable foe.
I do not trust anything that comes out of the mouth of a priest or the Pope in this matter.
From your experience, how big do you think the problem is? How many victims are we talking about?
It's a tough question, and and it's the other edge of that is how many perpetrator priests are there. The one thing I can definitively say is that it's more than any other profession or religion, and that's a problem. you know, I don't just sue for victims of clergy, I sue for victims of scouts and counselors and other denominations and religions. And the Catholics have this market cornered.
After the strategy meeting, Leona asked to speak with Rob privately.
All right, so you wanted to chat.
She's starting to worry that Vancouver's archbishop may not reveal the names on his list after all.
The archbishop had said that if I served on this review committee, that he had this responsibility to name names, that was important. I've sat on the committee for 9 months and bit my tongue as I heard stories that I think should be made public in some way.
I guess the question you ultimately want to ask or explore is, if you decide that you're going to do something with this list independently, what are the repercussions, right?
Exactly. What are the repercussions?
Nobody sees whistleblowers as heroes. I also signed a non-disclosure. I agreed when I went on this to that, so I would be breaking that piece. But at the heart of this, my biggest concern is, and I mean, I'm an early primary teacher, is for children and the safety of children. Can I betray the group? Does one outweigh the other? And then what an awful position to put me in.
Let's see if we can see what they're saying inside, group.
When we come back, the showdown in Cornwall.
Well, this is private property and the company does not allow anyone on the property.
In here, we're not allowed to film either? Correct.
So we can't bring our own cameras into the briefing?
No, I'm sorry.
The abuse took place in 1963. My abuser was Father Alphonse Robert, and we came to this place, which was the Sunset Motel. First of all, in that trip, what he started to do, which a lot of these predators do, started talking about sex. Finally, after the oral sex had finished, and he was standing in the doorway naked. And he said to me, referring to his erection, "It's a big one, isn't it?" This was a Catholic priest with an 11-year-old boy. I was petrified. I was terrified.
The group of survivors abused by Catholic priests have been planning this visit to Cornwall, Ontario for months. They want an audience with the most powerful men of that church in Canada, the Council of Catholic Bishops. Among their demands, the bishops open their archives and make public the names of clergy they know have abused. The council refused to hear the survivors, but on the eve of the conference, a smaller group of bishops reaches out, offering a meeting.
I've done some research on these bishops, and what's really important to know is, first of all, Prendergast is one of them.
Right.
This is Prendergast saying Mass with my offender.
Oh,
Connected.
Oh my gosh.
The other person that's on the list is Archbishop Miller from Vancouver. I have just finished being part of a case review process with Vancouver. Miller has in his hands a document that outlines what happened during the case review process. It talks about the number of cases that were looked at. He can release it.
Despite being a private meeting, someone decides to record the conversation.
What I need is to you to stand up and say, we support you in releasing that document. And it's going to be really hard for Archbishop Miller, and he's going to need a whole lot of people behind supporting him. And it's you.
That's Leona pleading with the other bishops to stand behind Miller in releasing the names he has from a committee she's been sitting on.
He's got that report right now. It's right there. It's right there. And it will open a door that needs to be open.
what did they all say?
He nodded and he knew, and he said, yeah, I have it right here. I have it right here. And wouldn't it have been wonderful if those men could have stood in that room and said, let's do it. Let's start, let's open the door.
But open doors do not come easily to the Council of Bishops. The next morning, the group arrives at the conference venue, still hoping they might get another word.
It's raining, so let's see if we can see what they're saying inside, group.
But this is private property and the company does not allow anyone on the property.
No, we'll put the signs away.
We'll put the signs away. We're just going to go to my room. I have a room here.
I know who you are. I think your room has been moved because for some reason you ended up in the block of the bishops, so they moved your room.
Okay, can you tell me what my room is,
No,
please?
I'll let you know when you do it.
Okay, so they changed my room. How did that happen? It's the Holy Spirit.
All of these people are going to go in your room.
Yeah, we're 7 people. We're just going to visit, watch the event on TV. Thank you. I'll go get my new room number. We were on the 4th floor, which happened to be the block where the bishops are staying.
Oh, yeah.
And so they moved us to the 1st floor. We're not here to create animosity or create grief. I want to treat you with I want to treat you with respect, and I would hope that I receive that in return. You know, clearly the reception received this morning was complete disrespect. They treated our group as though we're the criminals, that we've abused children. We're part of the solution.
They had the police here today.
They had the police here today. I had security at every entrance of the building following us come in, and I was greeted as though I was like some kind of criminal. My goodness, I'm a survivor of sexual abuse from a 12-year-old child. I wanted them to hear my message, the message of our group, and offer help to a solution to this problem that Canada has.
For 2 months, we also tried to get an audience with the bishops, any bishop, who would share the council's thinking on clergy abuse. Collectively, they have policies on how to handle abuse claims from minors going forward. But when it comes to accountability for crimes of the past, it's up to each individual bishop to decide whether to name abusers or not.
So, just tell, I'm sorry, in here we're not allowed to film either? Correct, yeah, correct.
But the invitation says we're welcome to record the media briefing.
No.
So we can't bring our own cameras into the briefing.
No, I'm sorry, but that was clear. It's the same conditions as this morning.
Why it's a media briefing? Why can't we bring our camera in?
No, again, it's the same conditions.
But you're not answering my question. Why?
There are no other cameras allowed.
Can I ask questions?
Yes, you'll be able to ask questions.
I can ask any questions I like.
When the briefing is done, you address questions on the topics that were brought up during the briefing.
So you get to set the topics. We can't ask questions on...
The topics are those items that were presented during today's general sessions. That's what the briefing will be about.
All right, well, I'll go see if I can get my questions answered.
Clergy sexual abuse was not on that day's agenda, but we asked anyway, relying on the conference's in-house camera.
Unless anybody else has a question, I'm with the Fifth Estate at CBC, Archbishop, and groups representing people who've suffered abuse at the hands of clergy are calling on the conference to release the names of credibly accused priests. They've been doing this for some time. This has happened in other jurisdictions, willingly or not. Why won't the Assembly of Catholic Bishops make those names available?
Well, I think first of all, we met with various groups on Sunday night, as you probably know. It was a very cordial meeting, and we're going to keep our conversation private, I think. One of the things that I raised there was that sometimes there's a misapprehension about what the Catholic Church actually is in Canada. Like we think of a church and we think of a head office someplace, but that's not the reality. The reality is that
this is maybe news for some people, but dioceses are all relatively independent realities. Each one is a church.
And yet we've not seen any diocese in this country publicly release those names. You are the head of a diocese. You are the Archbishop of Winnipeg. Have you compiled such a list, and will you make it public?
I have not in Winnipeg. No, I haven't.
Why not?
At this point, it's a question of discerning what is the appropriate thing to do in light of privacy laws, which vary from province to province, and so on. And so that's something that the bishops of Manitoba have to discuss further. Thank you very much. I appreciate you saying that several times. We got the message, and that's the kind of thing that will be discussed.
If the bishops did discuss releasing names of abusers, they didn't tell us or the survivors.
You're disappointed.
I'm extremely disappointed and frustrated. Yes.
So what are you going to do?
Go back to the West Coast, spend a lot of time reflecting. I'm hopeful. I still hold out a little bit of hope that Archbishop Miller will have been moved.
And if he decides not to make that document that he's sitting on public, what will you do?
I don't want to be the one that makes this document public. It shouldn't be my responsibility. And he was the one that sought out the media and made a media statement and about his goal to be transparent. He started this one.
It's true. Yeah.
I didn't ask.
Archbishop Miller declined our interview requests, but we have learned details about the case review he ordered.
The Vancouver Committee was presented with 36 files dating back to the 1950s. 26 involved the abuse of minors. In 7 cases, the victims were adults. There were 3 cases where priests were found to have fathered children. Most of the named clergy are now dead, but not all. At least one priest the committee looked into still lives in proximity to students. As for the systemic flaws Archbishop Miller said contributed to abuse or cover-up, we learned some details. Of accused priests who moved jurisdictions, who went for treatment rather than being referred to police. Of victims who were paid money and then forced to sign confidentiality agreements. Perhaps one of the most disturbing things we learned is how often church officials appeared to know of credibly accused perpetrators and yet did not share that information with the community at large.
It's going to be a long road, but we can do this together. We have to have this for those who come after.
How many other people are out there suffering in silence as I did for the number of years I did?
This is a global crisis. And what we've seen in other countries, we will see in Canada. You're not alone. And I wish that I could have been the mother that could have taken you, that you could have felt safe reporting to. So I think there's a lot more truth to be told, to be found out. There are stories that need to be told.
All right.
Thank you.
You're just starting the journey. We'll walk together, my friend. Thanks for having me. My pleasure. I love you.
So, having declined to speak to us about their plans, the Vancouver Archdiocese now says it will release some of the Case Review Committee's findings later this week. In a statement, the Archdiocese told us it takes any allegations of sexual abuse seriously. It said it was unaware of claims that priests who committed offenses were ever transferred or that appropriate authorities were not notified. We also contacted the rest of Canada's 60 dioceses to ask if they'd conducted reviews, and if so, whether they would release names of their credibly accused clergy. Of the 60, only 14 responded. 5 dioceses said they had done or were planning reviews, but none would commit to making the names public.